Hello, everyone. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate Rural Talk Radio Network, which is a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC, where we educate, enlighten, and entertain. The views of the guest may not represent the host of the station. Folks, I always have phenomenal guests on my show, and today I have an exceptional guest, who is Dr. Resa E. Lewis, and she co-wrote with Dr. Adaira Landry this wonderful book that I highly recommend, Micro Skills, Small Actions, Big Impact. Buy this book on Friday, be better at your job on Monday. And let me tell you some background about Dr. Lewis. She is a professor of emergency medicine at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, a TED Med speaker, Time's Up healthcare founder, designer, entrepreneur, and award-winning educator, mentor, and point-of-care ultrasound specialist. Dr. Resa Lewis also has the Visible Voices podcast, which I'm going to check out myself, which she amplifies content in the healthcare, equity, and current trend spaces. I want to welcome you, Dr. Lewis, to Chatting with Betsy.
It's wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, you are welcome. And I have to say this right off the top to the audience, Resa. This book is the type of book that you don't have to read in succession. You could take a chapter at a time. I recommend this book to anyone who just graduated, high school, college, master's degree. I think it's for people who work from home, stay-at-home moms or dads. And I definitely think this should be in every human resource manager's office, and every CEO of every company should have this book. That's how strongly I feel about this book. Resa, thank you, and Dr. Landry for writing it.
Not only am I so glad, thank you for saying that, but I agree. We wrote this book really as a general business self-help book for all people, all industries. Now, I know that sounds maybe hard to believe as listeners, but I think that, to your point, it can be a cover-to-cover read, or it can be go in and read on a specific topic read, because we have a very detailed table of contents. But our intention was to write a book that made no assumptions about where people start, with the goal of level setting with teaching micro skills so that we can all finish at the same place. And that finish is successfully navigating the workplace.
Absolutely. And I also want to add, because I forgot, for caregivers, this book is also for you. And there's a chapter, and I want to thank you, and you can thank Dr. Landry for me. Micro Skills for Self-Care, that is spot on, right on target. I loved it. I loved that chapter because I was a caregiver myself.
Yes, and many of us are caregivers, and I know you played a caregiving role for your husband. And for audience members that aren't familiar, my co-author and I are both emergency medicine physicians, and in addition, we are medical educators. So what that means was we were very intentional, deliberate in how we designed and wrote the book. We teach, literally, the reader how to. And we were intentional with starting the book. Our chapter 1 is Micro Skills for Self-Care, because industries don't teach it, they don't laud it, they don't model it, and we get messaging almost that we're not supposed to take care of ourselves. And we really want people to realize that the better they take care of themselves, the better equipped they are to take care of their team members at work, and ultimately the better work product that results.
Absolutely. You know, the saying you can't pour from an empty cup. I thought that this first chapter was so beneficial that I said, when I interview you, Dr. Landry unfortunately couldn't make it. She had to attend a meeting, but you could tell her for me, great job, because especially emergency room physicians, you don't get a correct sleep, right? You work different shifts. You eat on the fly. You can't hardly drink fluids because you don't even have time to go to the bathroom. And then how do you fit in your family life, meetings, and then you teach?
You're exactly right. And we have a very broad definition of self-care and of health. So sure, we talk about the importance of people taking care of their physical health, but we also emphasize the importance of financial health, civic health, social health, mental health, truly taking care of the comprehensive self so that when you come to work, you're ready, you can think clearly, and you can focus on your task list.
Yes, absolutely right. When I was reading this first chapter, and I said, how ironic that I'm reading this, and I, was a caregiver. I still am a caregiver, but in a different type of way. And I was thinking, you know what? People who are caregivers need to read this book because you talk about gratitude. You talk about taking care of yourself. And that is so important. And I'm sure as emergency room physicians, I would think you have to be in tip-top physical shape. You have to be on your game when you're at work. You have to be mentally alert, physically capable of the demands of your job.
Yeah, and for listeners that are wondering, this is definitely not a book solely for healthcare workers. We did write that with that lens, and the way we designed each chapter is we have a title. So, for example, you mentioned our Title I, Micro Skills for Self-Care, and you also mentioned HR, Human Resources. So we speak with the readers and walk them through, for example, micro skills to learn your workplace culture, micro skills for navigating conflict, micro skills to actively find new opportunities, and we really sort of think about anybody who is coming to the workplace, which is why if someone said, who would this really serve, we really believe this book and its content serves early career professionals that may not get a copy of something that we call the Workplace Playbook. And we start with a story, and many of our stories do come from our workplace. And those stories are to engage the reader emotionally and to also help them understand, give an illustration of the microskill. Then we actually explain why the microskill is important and the reader should consider incorporating it, learning it, and applying it to themselves at work. And then we say, listen, we are all human. We have not done this all right. So to that end, we outline why the skill may be hard to learn, hard to get on board with. And then finally, the part that we think distinguishes the book as different is we do bullet points, and these are called critical actions. And those are where we describe the how-to. And that's what we think is different. A lot of books just make lots of assumptions about the reader. You have a network, or you have financial resources, or you have a pedigree. And so we really made the assumption that we understand everybody does not start at the same place, and learning is limitless if only it is accessible. So we really try to make everything accessible and walk people through without making assumptions.
I love how you and Dr. Landry did this book, Resa, because you had the exercise. You and both Adaira talked about your own experience. So you show people that you are, like us, right? You expose yourself, which I think, people can relate to. People can relate. Oh, I see these doctors or like me, I can relate to their story. And you break it down, you have the micro skill, and you have the supplemental resources in the chapters.
I'm really glad that you brought up the supplemental resources. It's because, there's no way we could cover everything. And we also know that there are so many references and support for what we wrote. So it is not just anecdotal experience of Adaira and myself. This is actually supported based on research, based on the business literature. And at the end of each chapter, we have QR codes for further reading, further listening, and further knowledge.
Yes. I'm thrilled with this book. I'm going to tell you this. I can see this book becoming a bestseller. And if it doesn't, I would be really shocked. So when you become a bestseller, when this book does become a bestseller, let me know. I want to know.
Thank you.
Because I just really enjoyed it. And forgot what chapter it was. Maybe it was Setting Boundaries that Dr. Landry had spoken about, wrote about, from what I remember a couple of months ago that I read it, about doing Zoom meetings. And she doesn't really like doing it in the evening because, she's home with her children. And so she had to set boundaries about that. And it got me thinking, I need to set boundaries when I do my work from home. And that really encouraged me. So tell Dr. Landry I said thank you for that.
That resonates very much. And we actually think, work will take and take and take and take. And so we really encourage the reader in learning how to prioritize the self and take care of the self. You're exactly right. It is about setting boundaries. And one of the aspects we discuss in the book is setting boundaries on meetings, not just the time of day, but also how many of them per day and how long they last. We really feel that often a 1-hour meeting can be 30 minutes. A 30-minute meeting could be 20 minutes. A 20-minute meeting might be able to be an email exchange or a text. So many workplace cultures, the default is a meeting, and the default is a 1-hour meeting. And in terms of deliberate practice and focus and getting work done, that may not be the best organization for efficiency.
Absolutely. And we're on call, right? It seems like everyone on their phone, emails, people do, emails on the weekends. I know I'm guilty of it. But now I've set in my own boundary, Resa, that I will not answer an email after a certain time of night. If someone emails me 1 o'clock in the morning, I refuse to answer it. That's just not going to do it. They could wait.
When Adaira and I first started writing together, we started writing articles. And it's exactly what you just shared. It was a reflection of our experience in the workplace. I have a story that I share where I was leading a team in the Department of Emergency Medicine. And since we're emergency doctors and we work shifts at all hours, weekends, holidays, I just thought it was okay to send emails when I was up or when I was getting work done, knowing full well there was no expectation of a response. I just assumed that they would read it and respond, during business hours on Monday. But I had a team member that shared with me, gave me feedback that, when I sent an email on a Saturday, there was this feeling of pressure that he had to respond or read it, or even if he knew the work wasn't going to be timelined to be due right after the weekend, there was this feeling that he should be working. And I was amazingly appreciative, and that gave me great insight in terms of feedback. So one of the first articles that Adaira and I wrote was about a compassionate email culture. And with that, we talk about, sure, go ahead and write the email, but rather than sending it after business hours, on the weekends, on holidays, schedule that email. So it's off your plate, it's off your mind, but it doesn't need to be in the inbox for your team members or your supervisees or your trainees until, respecting their time and boundaries until it's time to be back at work. And that really is just a very healthy micro skill to incorporate and to really change team communication and dynamics, and to not just respect yourself in terms of getting your work done, but also respecting the boundaries and the time of your team members.
Absolutely. I had to set boundaries because basically I'm not an evening person. I'm tired by 7 o'clock. And I know people have different schedules, so once in a while I do have to interview someone at 7 o'clock because of their schedule. But I've made it a point not to make it a habit of doing that, and also on the weekends. I wanted to devote my weekend to my family.
Yeah.
My son, has sacrificed enough. So I like to really spend time with him that I wasn't able to spend time with for 10 years because of, caregiving. But I so appreciated hearing, the stories of you and Adaira, because it really, it makes it real, Resa. That's the only way I could put it. It just makes it real. Sometimes we read a book, we think, oh, this person has it all together. I can't relate to them. They don't understand. When I looked at your book and I read some of the chapters, I'm thinking, they understand. They know where I'm coming from. They live it.
I'm so glad to hear that. In our chapter 3, which is micro skills for polished communication, we actually have a micro skill called use storytelling strategically. And I share that when I was coming through training and was working as an academic emergency medicine physician, I made my presentations similar to that which was modeled for me, which was often very dry, bullet-pointed presentations that just quoted medical literature. Now, it's important to have a scientific basis for what we're teaching. And also, when I started doing public speaking, for example, in 2014, when I was invited to give a TED Med talk, it was the first time that I really was taught how to integrate stories and really realize the impact that stories can have in terms of connecting with the audience, bringing in the emotion, and also sharing my experience, because the audience is curious about the speaker, and I had not reflected in that way. And so once I had that lesson and that training, I never give a presentation without bringing in a vignette, an excerpt, a story to illustrate. And these stories that Adaira and I write, they're real stories, and they're truly our experience. And what's interesting is, as we were writing the book and discussing the table of contents and the stories, we have not had the same exact experience, and also we've had very overlapping experiences in some case, and that led us to feel, this is a very important micro skill to teach. Oh, this is a very important micro skill to teach.
And what exactly do you mean by micro skill? Because people might be hearing, what's a micro skill?
So a micro skill, sure, it's a little bit what it sounds like. It is a small fundamental step or a building block. And what we say is, if you have an overwhelming task at work, a huge project, something that is just overwhelming and you're not sure how to tackle it, sometimes it doesn't even have to be a project. It can be, a character trait or a habit that you'd like to work on. We really believe these large, overwhelming things can be broken down into these fundamental building blocks. And that's what we do. We break down, for example, polished communication into specific building blocks. And that those building blocks, not only do they add upon each other to bring you to being a polished communicator, what the reader will see is the micro skill that they learn in one chapter can then be applied or brought with them. It gets threaded throughout the text. So we're not just teaching isolated microskills, we're teaching the reader a way to think and a way to approach when they feel stuck, when they feel paralyzed, when they're procrastinating because of overwhelm. Stop, break it down into small steps. And another way to think about it is tying a shoe. We all learned to tie a shoe, and now it seems like one global task. But it was small steps. It was pulling out the tongue, inserting your foot, dropping your heel, pulling the laces taut, straightening the tongue, etc. So that's just a good way to think about it.
I really like how the book is presented, and I can't stress enough, this book I think should be read by everyone who's going for an interview. I would get this book and read it because I think it's very important to know how to communicate and conduct yourself when you are applying for a job. And the market, it must be tough out there these days, the competition. And I think this book will give someone an edge up. I really do.
To that end, because we know, like, the modern workplace is different. It's changed. I guess you could probably say that about every decade, every generation, every era. But what we know is the concept of staying in one job, one position for one's whole career and being a, quote, lifer, that's much less common. Current generations change jobs 3 to, I've seen, upwards of 9 times. And to that end, we actually have our final chapter entitled Microskills to Actively Find New Opportunities. And we walk the reader through thinking about their current skills and skill set and how those might convert to something else. Applying for something before you check off every single criteria, or what we call applying to out-of-reach opportunities. One of those overlapping stories and experiences that's in that chapter is about drafting your own letter of recommendation. I will never forget, I had just finished my training and I was applying for a job and I needed letters of recommendation. So I asked my supervisor and he said, sure, I'll definitely write that. Can you draft it and send it to me? And my jaw dropped. I really thought that the supervisor was asking me to do something illegal. I thought he was being lazy. I thought I'd never heard of this before. Come to find out, it's exquisitely common. It's one of the most not secrets, I think, in the workplace. I mean, once you realize that this happens all the time, it's obviously not a secret. But, you know, it was really, really took me off guard. And to be clear, Adaira and I advise that you write your own letter of recommendation unless the criteria say, you know, that you are signing off and that you've not seen the letter and that you've not written the letter. But in general, those requirements are, you know, it would state as such if that's the requirement. But we turned this experience into another one of our articles that made it into the book about how to write a letter of recommendation for yourself. And this has been one of our most successful pieces, microskill as well as article, because we actually say, listen, you're the most reasonable and rational, best person to write your letter of recommendation. You know yourself best. You have specific concrete experiences that will be much easier for you to recall than the supervisor, who probably has many asks and many letters that they're supposed to write. And also you can actually say why this meets your future goals, how exactly you're the right fit for the position. And we actually walk the reader through how to write and structure that letter of recommendation as a draft. The polishing and the superlatives should absolutely be done by the letter writer. But writing your first draft makes sense, and it actually takes work off the plate of the person you're asking. Because when you ask, the person says, oh, that's work, that's a task. And by making it easy and handing in them the draft when you make the ask, or saying, you know, asking, they say yes, sharing the draft with them, that really makes it an easy list for them.
I also, in this, the chapter you're talking about, you had the micro skill, becoming comfortable talking about yourself. We're not comfortable talking about ourselves. We feel like it's being boastful or a pride. I mean, we're not supposed to do that, but you have to sometimes.
It's a very interesting observation. And, a lot of the business literature or articles will talk about the 2-minute elevator pitch, like being able to speak about yourself or speaking about your project or speaking about your idea in 2 minutes that it takes to ride an elevator with someone. So it's sort of related to that. We actually do think it's very important to become comfortable speaking about yourself and, letting people know who you are, what you're bringing to the table. I have a story. I was on a podcast episode, and before that episode, I assumed that people read about me or Googled me or somehow knew who I was. So I was in conversation, super excited. My two guests, also physicians, and also work in the equity space. And as we were speaking, it was clear one guest knew me because we're in the same specialty, and one guest was meeting me for the first time. And the guests that didn't know me, I didn't realize that I, too, am a physician, and I, too, have written and done work in the equity space. And I realized that based on the level of comfort or things that were being explained or responses to my questions. So in that conversation, the podcast recording, I let the guest who didn't know me know, oh, yes, because I've also written this, or, oh, yes, in this report. And it became clear, and, the cadence of the conversation changed. But that was amazing feedback for me, about which I was exquisitely appreciative. And from that time forward, I always make sure I intentionally introduce myself to the guest and give them background on me and on the podcast. And every single conversation since then has gone much more smoothly.
That's a great idea. I mean, I was always told, do your research on your guest, and also that guests should do research on the host. That doesn't always happen. I know I always research on my guests. That's the only script I have, Resa, is about the guest. Everything else is just, I go with the flow of the conversation. I think it's very important, and I know I find myself sometimes, if I have been on a podcast or on a panel and people ask about, what I do, it was a little uncomfortable to be put on the spot and say what I do, especially when I felt like, these other people do so much more, and I'm just, putting myself down is what I was thinking in my head, which I need to stop doing. But that's an important skill. It really is. And I appreciate that you have that in this book.
And I'm really glad that you're bringing this up and sharing, because that's exactly what we acknowledge, and that's exactly why we have those sections of each chapter of, it's entitled, Why is this skill hard to achieve? So in the bullet points under that section, we acknowledge, depending on the household in which you grew up, the community in which you grew up, maybe based on your identity, some people are very comfortable talking themselves. Some people are less comfortable talking about themselves. And we explain why it would be important. And we, again, for people that would be less comfortable, less initiated, less like I don't even know how to or where to or how do I start, that's the step-by-step. Those are our critical actions that we take the reader through.
You have great chapters in here about feedback, about communicating with coworkers, about apologizing to coworkers, not an easy thing to do, about being careful with about gossip. My goodness, isn't that's a problem in the workplace? I know firsthand. I've seen it in action. how people can gossip and over-exaggerate and cause problems.
Yeah, regarding the apologizing, what we tried to do, because we understand some people might think, well, what do I even say? And so we actually have graphics, and we have some charts and boxes where we actually give examples of what you could say when you apologize. And we actually have designations of what to say and what not to say, and what the apology could look like. And of course, we don't want people to just repeat verbatim what we have written in the book. We want it to them to make it their own and fit with their personality and the kind of words they would use. But modeling language and modeling examples, we've gotten feedback that that's been very, very helpful. Vis-a-vis your comment on gossip, again, we really tried to be comprehensive of, everybody's workplace. I had the experience where I was speaking with a supervisor, and I had shared that I was considering looking at other jobs as I was thinking about promotion and professional growth. And the supervisor told me, it'll stay between us, no one will know, let me know when I can share. And soon thereafter, I was in a meeting, and a person asked me a very awkward, direct question. I was like, where was this coming from? Another person at the meeting said, oh, come on, Resa, we all know. And again, I thought, wow, amazing feedback. And that's just it. We all have had things happen in the workplace. And one of the ways that Adaira and I really share these stories is to share how feedback is a good thing. We learned because of these experiences. So in my case, with this meeting and this person saying, oh, come on, Resa, we all know, I was like, wow, when you share certain things that are, quote, confidential, and the person gives you their word that it's confidential, it may not always be confidential. And what I've done going forward is when someone has something potentially confidential that they're going to be sharing with a supervisor, I just share, listen, when you share something like that, when you tell them, you should work on the assumption that everybody will know, even though they may say. And I've had a few people come back to me and say, Resa, thank you for telling me that. You were exactly right. And so certain things in the workplace, you should assume that when you're sharing this news that it's going to be spread. And so, we just really, we try to help the reader be careful about, what are the pitfalls, what can potentially happen, and how can they really navigate successfully the workplace.
Yes, that is so important. I had a director, I used to work in a preschool, and she would talk about everyone. And she's a director, so she's running it. And very poor role model, because if she had a beef with someone, she would tell everybody. Everyone would know about it. And that's not right. Or if you told her something in confidence, everybody would know about it. It's just not a professional environment. Before I wrap up, Resa, I got to ask the question, how did you and Adaira come to meet and to write this book together?
I really appreciate this question, so thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
We have a lot of Venn diagram overlaps. There is, geographically, we both have done our training, a portion of it. For me, all my training has been in the Northeast. For Adaira, her residency was in New York City at NYU. Her fellowship was in Boston at the Brigham and Women's Hospital. So the fact that we're both emergency medicine physicians, we both have subject matter expertise in ultrasound, there were a lot of reasons for overlap. And one of our first conversations, she reached out to me because she was looking at fellowships in Boston. Soon thereafter, we had more conversations, and our relationship started as mentor-mentee, and then over time it became equal collaborators on articles and on this book. And we had one key conversation during the pandemic. She had developed expertise as a mentor. I, too, had had a lot of experiences and really value mentorship. I think it's really important And she called me to talk about it, and she asked, do you think I can write about this and develop this as my academic niche? And I said, absolutely. And if you ever want to write something together, let me know. She followed up soon thereafter. We started writing articles, and we found we were really good writing partners. And she came to me and said, I want to write a book. And I said, that's great. And she said, do you want to write it with me? And I was so appreciative of the opportunity. This had not been on my radar. And writing this book and putting this out in the world with the hopes of helping people has been so much fun and very, very rewarding.
Well, I want to thank you and Adaira, thank her for me, for writing this awesome book. It is such, I can't even sometimes put my thoughts into words, but this book, folks, I'm telling you, and I don't care if I sound redundant, this book should be really in everyone's home because it will just help you be a better person. And it gives a lot of breaking down the micro skills. I mean, who doesn't need help communicating? Even if you're retired like me. And, I communicate with people. If you are a stay-at-home person, you're communicating with people. I think that's a book that can relate to everyone, no matter what their job is, whether they have one or not. But definitely, I would buy this as a gift for graduates. It was graduating season, as I call it, and what a great gift to give to someone for a graduation gift. And I want to thank you, Dr. Resa Lewis, for writing this book, and good luck. Where can people buy it? Where can people purchase it?
Thanks for all that. And we agree about it being the perfect gift for graduates and for people who are starting a new stage, no matter what that stage. Even mid-career and late-career people have really said, wow, this was helpful. It is available wherever you buy books. You can request it at your library, request your independent bookshop to carry it. It's available on Amazon, bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, so all the online sites. Adaira and I are on all the social media platforms, meaning X, LinkedIn, Instagram, and we each have websites. If you type in her name, Adaira Landry, MD, and I'm Resa Lewis, MD, or you can do Resa E. Lewis, MD. Both will get you to the same place. You can find out more about us, and also please reach out. We love being in touch. We love hearing feedback about the book.
Oh, that is wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough. It was such an honor and privilege. Enjoyed talking to you so much, Resa. Folks, buy the book, I'm telling you, Micro Skills, Small Actions, Big Impact. Buy this book on Friday. Be better at your job on Monday. I highly, highly recommend this book. I'm so glad I received a copy. And I'm not giving this book away. Some books I gave away. This one I'm keeping so I could refer to it. And folks, you need to subscribe to my show if you don't already do so. Chatting with Betsy is for free on Spotify, Spreaker, iHeart, and Apple. Oh, and where is your podcast can be heard, Resa?
Thanks for that. It's called the Visible Voices Podcast, and as you said, I cover conversations in the healthcare, equity, and current trend spaces. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify, iHeart, etc.
Thank you. I'm going to check that out myself because I love to hear doctors talk about and get their viewpoint on what's going on in healthcare and other topics today. And I want to thank you all for listening and subscribing. And I'm here to help you. I'm here to be a resource. I'll tell you right now, Dr. Lewis and Dr. Landry are wonderful resources. I would definitely check them out. And I want to thank Jeannie White, who's the station manager who produces the show, writes the blog. All the information about Dr. Lewis, Dr. Landry, will be in the blog. And I want to thank Lillian Caldwell, who's CEO of Passion World Talk Radio, that makes this all possible. And if you want to follow me, I'm on Facebook, Betsy E. Wurzel, Wurzel. And if you are looking for a caregiving group for support, I have hashtag Kick Alzheimer's Ass Movement on Facebook. Everyone is welcome. And I just think that we can make a workplace a better place for sure. And this book that we just talked about, Micro Skills, Small Actions, Big Impact, will definitely help a workplace environment. I really think so. I think if everyone read it, it would definitely improve a workplace. And, leadership starts from the top. So I just have to say, if any CEOs listening, buy this book. Buy it for your company. And recommend for your employees to read it because I really think it's that necessary. And I'm thrilled about it, and I'm excited about your book. And best wishes. I hope it does well, and I know it'll be a bestseller. I have that feeling. So you can let me know if that happens. Excuse me. This is Betsy Wurzel, your host of Passionate World Talk. Your host of Chatting with Betsy on Passionate World Talk Radio Network, a subsidiary of Global Media Network, LLC. As I always say at the end of my show, in a world where you can be anything, please be kind and shine your light bright. That's it for today. Chat with you soon. Bye-bye now.